How do you upgrade your peer group and the people you surround yourself with? That's probably one of the most common questions I get asked, and many reasons for that. I think also because one of the most popular podcasts that I've ever done was on London Real, and one of the first things I suggest on how to improve the quality of your life was to upgrade your peer group. So on this video, I want to give you some hints and tips, 3 specific things on how to really go about upgrading your peer group and what you should be looking for and some of the pitfalls to avoid when actually putting a new peer group or joining a peer group that's going to really improve your life. Now, a lot of this is modeled on something called the Elite Mentorship Forum, which is a peer group that I put together because I was pretty much shocked that there was very little around in the personal growth industry that really afforded people the opportunity to really have the kind of peer group that I wanted to create. If you've been part of the Elite Mentorship Forum, then please leave some comments here as to what you feel. But ultimately, what I want to share on this video are some hints and tips that you can take away right now and go and apply so that, whether you ever join the Elite Mentorship Forum or not, you've got something to really guide you along the way to really help with what I think is the most important part of personal growth, and that is choosing who you hang with. So, why should we do that? That's got to be the first part of this video, right? Because so many people run off on a tangent. I want to upgrade my peer group. The first question is why? Why is it even important? Well, allow me to share some insight. You see, we're all subject to a law that very few people are consciously aware of. And it's called the Law of Conformity. In other words, the 95% law that I call it. And that's because 95% of people are essentially producing behaviors that are in reaction to the environment they're in. Now, in the physical world, we understand that. If you take the body, for example, the body's a 24/7 adaptation machine. Its job is to adapt to its environment. If it's too hot, it will adapt and you will sweat. If it's too cold, it will shiver. If you put it in the gym, it will get stronger. If you put it in McDonald's or Burger King, then it's going to react differently. So it doesn't care what the nature of the input is. It doesn't get to choose that. It only gets to choose how to react to its environment and try to adapt as best it can to cope with whatever external stimuli is presented to it. Now, the inner world is very similar. The inner world is essentially a 24/7 adaptation machine based upon its environment. And that's where upgrading a peer group is so important and valuable because a lot of our behaviors that we engage in are usually out of habit. We do not many things out of intelligence a lot of the time, unfortunately, or reason. We do a lot out of passion and emotion, but a vast majority of what a human being does in terms of behavior is done out of habit. Now, if you've ever stopped to think that a behavior, anytime you do a behavior or engage in a behavior, is because there is a thought preceding it that is driving or causing that behavior. You can't do anything in terms of taking an action or a decision without previously having been triggered or directed by a thought. So the mistake that many people make is that they try to change behaviors without realizing that it's the thinking behind the behaviors that really is where the problem is. And that's because they are habitual. Now, having habitual thoughts is actually an evolutionary plus. It means that we don't have to learn to walk every day, or you don't have to take your driving test again and again, because once we've mastered something long enough, then it becomes almost unconscious. And unfortunately, most of our unconscious thoughts are again influenced by the environment that we're in. And to give you another analogy, the mind is very much like a compass needle. It can only point in one direction at a time. And its default gravitational magnetic north, to stick with that metaphor, is influenced by the environment that continually strokes that compass needle with another magnet to point it in a certain direction. So that when we're conscious 5 to 10% of the time, then we can take that compass needle and drag it into a direction that we choose. But when we're what I call sleeping awake, then what happens is that compass needle automatically goes back to where it's been most conditioned. And in our inner world, which creates all of our behaviors and thinking patterns that drive our external habits, that is very rarely looked at. And the biggest influence of our inner world is the input that we surround ourselves with, and the biggest version of that is our peer group. So why should we upgrade our peer group? Because you are going to essentially become who you hang with. And we see that whether it's kids that vote the same politically as their parents did, not because they have a deep understanding of the actual issues, but because that's what their parents did. Or they like certain foods or music because that's what they grew up with. It's an environment that continually programs us. So the 95% law is a huge part of why we should take seriously upgrading our peer group. Now, it's almost like swimming in a river. If you're in a river, you have a current that is driving the general direction. Now, sure, you can start to swim against it. You can be hanging around with people that aren't inspiring, and you could try to stay focused and on point. But at some point, you're going to take a breath, and the current will usually win over time. Another way of saying that is if you hang out with 10 high-level entrepreneurs or people that are self-motivated, inspiring, kind-hearted, coming from a high level of frequency or consciousness that come from how can we make the world a better place, how can we improve ourselves, how can we continually grow and contribute, then chances are you're going to become the 11th. If you hang around with 10 recreational drug users that are complaining about life, that are watching daytime TV and eating Domino's pizza for their healthiest meal of the day, then I've got news for you. As inspired as you can be temporarily in certain moments, the current will take you downstream at some point, and you'll likely become the 11th, or at least start to give tendencies towards the behavior of the people you surround yourself with. So the first tip I want to give you is know why you should upgrade your peer group. Don't take this lightly. It is by far the fastest way to be able to change the circumstances of your life, is to change who you hang with and start to adapt to or conform with. Case closed. The second tip I'm going to give you on this video when it comes to upgrading your peer group, very, very simple. Know what it is that you want out of a peer group. A lot of people go to a peer group or look for a new peer group with a criteria that's very similar to how they set goals. And it goes something like this. For purposes of this analogy, I want you to imagine that you're in a train station and you're looking to buy a ticket. And you want to go somewhere, and you have any option to choose from. And so here's how it goes for many people, including how they react to looking to go to a peer group. And you walk up and the person behind the counter says, oh, hello, good afternoon. And where would you like to go? And you're all excited, you've got this chance, this opportunity to be able to start, moving your life in a different direction. And you walk up with a big smile and say, oh, great, thank you so much. Yeah, I'd like to be not here. And the person selling the ticket says, well, that's great, but where would you like to go? Oh, I just don't want to be here. Most people are trying to avoid the people they're with when they upgrade their peer group and give far more energy and attention to where they don't want to be currently, rather than really choose specifically the kind of people that you want to be moving into and why. Because different peer groups can have very different energies. They can have very different purposes. If you know in advance what energy that you want to be able to be part of, or what direction that you want to be able to be going in with a peer group to support that, then half the battle's already won. You don't just want to close your eyes and throw a dart in the board and say, oh wow, at least it's not where I am now. That doesn't work. So know exactly what kind of peer group you want. Design it. Ask yourself better questions. If I could hang out with 10 people for the rest of my life as the only friends I would have, what kind of qualities would I want those people to have? Who would I want them to be for me? Who would I want to show up as for them? And start really identifying that, because once your brain's got a target, it knows what to look for. But if you're running around trying to search for not here, then anywhere else will do. And you don't want to invest all the time and energy in being able to recreate an environment of peers only to find out too late that, well, really I'm in the same boat, just with a different coat of paint. Now, the third tip that I'm going to give you is to bring your A game. What do I mean by bringing your A game? I mean that you have to show up. The only way that you're going to be accepted into a higher level peer group is if you can come and bring something to the table. And I say to my students, especially in the EMF, you want to be looking to seek first to add before you take. Now, why is that important? I want a peer group because I want something for myself. That doesn't work. The whole aspect of nature works upon contribution first before you get something for it. That's how money works. If you're chasing money right now, is it no wonder why you don't think you have enough? Because most people are chasing the consequence rather than the actual cause. The cause of money is to be able to add something of value first, which will cause somebody to then use this medium of exchange called money to actually exchange that particular amount of value. Whereas a lot of people are sitting in front of the fire, freezing, saying, please give me some heat first, and then I'll go fetch you some wood. And of course that doesn't work. If you go to a peer group saying, oh great, now I've upgraded my peer group, what can I get? You're not going to last very long, even if you get through the door. So switch the frame of reference. What is it that I can contribute to this peer group? Who do I need to bring? And that isn't your B or C game, guys. That is your A game. Coming from that place. Now, one of the tips that I can meld into that is this. If you're going to join a peer group, one of the things I suggest is that you find a peer group that is committed to a journey of personal growth. There's a lot of peer groups you can get away from not here, which seem better by contrast, but are just sort of hanging out at what maybe seem to be a higher level than where you were. And by contrast, you may feel that's great. But if you're not growing, you're standing still. And if you're standing still, you're actually going backwards because the world continues to move. So, look for a peer group that has a commitment to actually wanting to continuously improve themselves, to become better versions of themselves, to be able to contribute more. And that's where, as I say, you really need to start asking better questions. In fact, the reason that the Elite Mentorship Forum is so powerful is because we have a very structured program over 6 months where we work on how you bring your A game up to a level that you never thought possible. How do we work on you? Because if there's more of you to be able to contribute, it makes sense that more doors are going to be open to you to want to be able to be invited into a peer group that actually you can contribute to and get benefit from. So, I've covered a few things here in this video, and I don't want to go on too long because I'm going to give a series of videos this month just on peer group and really give you some hints in some of the other aspects of the Elite Mentorship Forum so that I can bring some of my best learnings from there and give it to you on these videos to be able to apply today. And we break that into 3 particular phases. The first one, foundation and reinvention, which is really what I've covered here, because you need to basically know where you're going and why. It's important. You need to be able to identify the kind of peer group you want, what standards you want to be held accountable for, and really to hold yourself to a level where you bring your A game, seeking to contribute first before you start running around trying to find somewhere else to re-plug in your umbilical cord. That doesn't work. Now, on the next video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you 2 of the most common mistakes on how to go about getting a peer group that people usually fall into, because there is definitely a right way to be able to do it and definitely a wrong way when it comes to actually knocking on the door and going out trying to put yourself into or inviting people to become part of a peer group. So stay tuned for the next video for that. And in the meantime, go over this again and ask yourself some great questions. If I could only spend my life with 10 people, who would they be and why? I'll leave you with that one.